The Dead Sea is dropping 1.2 meters every year. Hotels that opened on the waterfront 30 years ago now sit a kilometer inland. Scientists give it 50 years, maybe less. But here's the question that matters more. Will you be here to see it in the next 5? Jerusalem, the old city, where 35,000 people live within walls built 2,000 years ago. Where 4 quarters, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Armenian, each hold their own world, yet every street eventually leads to the same sacred ground. We begin at the Western Wall, the last remnant of the Second Temple, destroyed by Rome in 70 CE. What remains is this, a wall that has held the weight of 2,000 years of prayer. The plaza stretches wide before it. Men on the left, women on the right. Soldiers in fatigues pray beside elderly pilgrims. Tourists stand uncertain at the edge, unsure whether they belong, but the wall does not distinguish. It simply stands, it simply holds. You see them, hands pressed to limestone, prayers written on scraps of paper, folded small, pushed into crevices between the stones, millions of them. Requests, confessions, hopes too private for words spoken aloud. The wall becomes the repository of what cannot be said elsewhere, and here is what you feel. Even if you came as a skeptic, something about a place where so many have brought their most desperate prayers changes the air itself. The stones hold memory, not metaphor, real. Moshe has guided visitors here for 30 years. He has watched pilgrims weep, soldiers pray, tourists stand uncertain. When asked what he sees in this wall, his answer is simple, but not easy. Every stone here has a pulse, he says. You put your hand on it, you feel it. Not metaphor, real. This wall holds Jewish memory, yes, but look around. Christian pilgrims come too. Muslim visitors. All memory is here, all real. That is what people do not understand until they stand here. And he is right. The wall is not a museum artifact, it is a living thing. Prayers arrive daily, grief arrives, hope arrives, and the wall absorbs it all, as it has for centuries. Behind the plaza, the Jewish quarter spreads across gentle slopes, clean limestone streets, synagogue courtyards, where afternoon light pools golden, cafes tucked into ancient archways, where old men argue over newspapers and young families push strollers over stones worn smooth by millennia of footsteps. This is the most accessible of the 4 quarters. The slopes are gentle, rest comes often, cafes, courtyards, shadows to catch your breath. Even for those who walk with care, the quarter offers pause. The Western Wall itself has wheelchair ramps. The tourism ministry thought of this. They knew the sacred should not require youth to access. Beneath residential apartments, archaeological digs reveal layers. 1st century streets, Byzantine mosaics, Crusader walls. The past does not stay buried here. It pushes through. Residents live atop 2,000 years of their own history, and it shows in how they move. Careful, reverent, as if walking on the bones of ancestors. The hidden truth this quarter reveals, survival through continuity. The Jewish presence here is not ancient history, it is daily life. Children play in courtyards, where their great-grandparents played. Shops sell bread using recipes 5 generations old. Memory is not preserved in museums, it is baked into bread, it is sung at dinner tables, it is lived. And this is the first answer to the question the hook posed. What does it mean when the sacred refuses to let go? Here it means this. The sacred is not separate from the ordinary. It is woven into it. You pray at the wall, then you buy vegetables 3 streets over. You commemorate ancient destruction, then you take your children to school. The sacred and the ordinary do not compete. They coexist. They must. But 200 meters away, a different kind of devotion marks the stones. This is where the story of Jesus walked to its end.
The Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrows. 14 stations marking the path Jesus walked to crucifixion. Pilgrims walk it daily. Some carry wooden crosses on their shoulders, retracing his final steps. They pause at each station marked by plaques, chapels, memories 2,000 years old. You hear prayers in a dozen languages: Polish, Tagalog, Spanish, Portuguese, English. The path belongs to no single people. It belongs to grief that transcends language. But here is the paradox the Holy Land refuses to resolve. This sacred path runs straight through a commercial street. Shopkeepers sell olive wood carvings 5 meters from Station 7. A cafe brews coffee beside Station 9. Tourists haggle over ceramics while pilgrims weep 10 feet away. The sacred and the ordinary do not take turns here. They happen simultaneously, and no one finds this strange. What the guidebooks will not tell you, holiness does not demand silence. It does not require separation. Here it coexists with commerce, with noise, with life. The sacred path does not avoid the world, it cuts straight through it. The Via Dolorosa ends at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, built over the traditional site of crucifixion and resurrection. The church itself is a paradox. 6 Christian denominations share control: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian Apostolic, Coptic, Ethiopian, Syriac Orthodox. Inside they have divided the space with surgical precision. This altar belongs to the Greeks, that chapel to the Armenians, this stone to the Catholics. Every centimeter is claimed, contested, defended. There is a ladder on the facade. It has been there since 1853. No one is allowed to move it. They call it the immovable ladder. It exists because the 6 denominations cannot agree on who has authority to move it. So it stays, a symbol of stalemate frozen in wood. This is coexistence through rigid boundaries, not harmony, something harder, something more real. Inside the church is chaos. Golden light streams through high windows, incense smoke thick enough to taste. Competing services overlap, Orthodox chanting layered over Catholic hymns layered over Armenian prayers. Pilgrims queue for hours to touch the stone of anointing, to enter the edicula where tradition says Christ was buried. The emotional weight here is immense, where grief became hope for 2 billion people, where the darkest moment in Christian memory transformed into its most luminous promise. You feel it in the air, the density of belief concentrated over 2 millennia. Outside, the Christian quarter streets are narrower than the Jewish, the cobblestones older, the incline steeper. Here the stones remember centuries not in comfort but in challenge. The steep steps and narrow passages ask more of the body. But for those who prefer guidance, small groups win through daily, pausing at each station, carrying both story and support. The path is not easy. Pilgrimage, after all, was never meant to be. But it is navigable, even for those who walk with care. The hidden truth this quarter reveals: coexistence is not unity. It is not even tolerance sometimes. It is simply this: continuing to exist in the same space despite irreconcilable differences. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre does not resolve its internal divisions. It holds them. It keeps standing. That is its own kind of miracle. But in the quarter where the oldest story whispers, survival itself becomes sacred.
The Armenian Quarter is the one most visitors miss, not because it is hidden on a map, but because it is hidden in mood. The streets narrow, the noise thins, and suddenly, the old city feels less like a crossroads, and more like a cloister. It is the smallest of Jerusalem's 4 quarters, tucked behind thick monastery walls that do not advertise what they protect. You pass through a gate, and the temperature seems to drop, not from weather, but from quiet. Courtyards open like pockets of shade, laundry hangs between limestone balconies, a school bell rings, and for a moment the old city sounds ordinary. Armenians have lived in Jerusalem for more than 16 centuries. They arrived as pilgrims, then stayed as neighbors, then became a presence so constant, the city stopped noticing. And that is one of the hidden truths this quarter reveals. Survival does not always arrive as a headline. Sometimes it arrives as routine. In the monastery library, Father Serup tends manuscripts older than many nations. His family has lived within these walls for generations. When asked what survival looks like here, he sets down his tea as if answering a question he has been carrying for a long time. Survival isn't loud, he says. It's quiet. Daily. Bread. Prayer. Teaching children their language. Existence as resistance. The world forgets the Armenians are here, but we don't forget. The stones remember us. There is a particular gravity to those words if you are in the season of life when legacy feels tangible. When you count what remains more than what has been spent, the Armenian Quarter does not plead for attention. It does not demand that you take its side. It simply continues. And in that continuation, Loop 3 deepens. The sacred refusing to let go does not only mean grand rituals at famous walls. Sometimes it means the smaller decision to endure, to keep a language alive, to keep bread warm, to keep children learning the names of saints and streets. You leave the monastery courtyard and step back into sunlight. The old city rises again in volume. The scent of spices returns. Footsteps multiply, because beyond these quiet walls, Jerusalem's most crowded quarter waits, where faith and commerce share the same doorway, and where complexity is not a concept but a daily skill. The Muslim Quarter does not ease you in. It takes you by the hand and pulls you into motion. Here, Jerusalem is not a museum of faith.
It is a living city at full volume. The souk compresses the air with spice and heat. Vendors call out prices. Metal shutters clatter open. A butcher's knife hits wood with a rhythm that feels older than the language around it. Above you, strings of light bulbs cross the alley like constellations made practical. And yet, even in the market's urgency, the sacred is never far. You turn a corner and the golden dome appears between cables and laundry lines, an impossible geometry floating above ordinary life. In a city that is claimed by 3 religions, this is one of the clearest symbols of how the same stone can carry different names, and therefore different destinies. To Jews, it is the Temple Mount, the site of the first and second temples, the heart of ancient worship. To Muslims, it is Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque. The difference is not only vocabulary, it is identity, it is history, it is grief with a long memory. This is where Loop 2 sharpens. Not all urgency is environmental. Some urgency is human, the urgency of standing in a place that holds so much meaning that even the names become contested. For those watching from afar with safety in mind, the reality on the ground often feels quieter than the headlines. Visitors move through routine checkpoints, the way they move through airport security, brief pauses, then forward again. Many choose small guided groups, not because the city is impossible, but because complexity is easier to carry when someone is holding the map with you. And still, none of this makes the quarter simple. The Muslim Quarter reveals a truth guidebooks rarely articulate. Coexistence is not a slogan, it is a practice. It is walking past a sacred gate while negotiating the price of pomegranates. It is hearing the call to prayer thread through the same air as church bells. It is learning to live beside stories you cannot control. If the Armenian Quarter taught survival through quiet continuity, the Muslim Quarter teaches survival through daily negotiation, of space, of rhythm, of meaning. And to understand how those negotiations look beyond Jerusalem's walls, you have to leave the old city. 6 miles south, the landscape changes, so does the story.
In Bethlehem, the sacred begins with a door so low you must bow to enter. They call it the door of humility, and it is not metaphor. Your body learns the lesson before your mind does. Inside the Church of the Nativity, the air is cool and dim. Candles tremble in gold light. Pilgrims move slowly, as if speed would be disrespect. Beneath the altar, a silver star marks the traditional place of birth. People kneel. People cry without embarrassment. In a land where stories compete, this is one of the few moments that feels universally claimed. Step outside, and the present returns. Traffic, coffee, shopkeepers arranging olive wood carvings. Children weaving through crowds like they have memorized the city's angles. And then, not far away, the wall rises. 8 meters of concrete covered in paint, doves, keys, portraits, slogans that look like prayers when you do not understand the language. Layla teaches English at a local school. She is 32. She has never been to Jerusalem, 6 miles away, because the permit is not hers to grant. When asked what she tells her students about the wall, she gestures toward a mural of a bird in flight. Walls don't last. Layla says, empires don't last, stories do. So we keep telling ours. That's what survives, not concrete, memory. Her words do not ask you to pick a side in a comment section. They ask you to notice something quieter. That resilience is often made of ordinary acts. A classroom still opening in the morning, a bakery still warming bread, a teacher still insisting that language can travel farther than a checkpoint. This is where Loop 3 takes on sharper meaning. The sacred refusing to let go is not only prayer at an ancient wall, it is the refusal of people, Israeli, Palestinian, Armenian, to let their lives be reduced to headlines. And Loop 2 continues to widen. Urgency is not only about water levels and timelines, it is about human time, about what a person cannot assume will become easier later. Bethlehem holds both tenderness and tension in the same palm, and when you leave it, the road begins to drop, the city thins, the hills open, and ahead, nature keeps its own deadline. Leaving Bethlehem, the road begins to fall. Not metaphorically, literally. Jerusalem sits high, breathing thin air and prayer. But as you drive east, the hills unroll into desert, and the altitude signposts tick downward like a quiet countdown. The color drains from limestone into sand. The horizon widens. The world simplifies. You are descending toward the lowest point on Earth. The Dead Sea arrives, not as a lake, but as a mirage made real. Turquoise water held in a bowl of pale desert. The shoreline glitters with salt, as if the land has been dusted with frost. You step into it, and the water refuses your weight. It lifts you. It reminds you that physics here plays by different rules. And for a moment, the urgency that has followed us, from contested names in Jerusalem to concrete walls in Bethlehem, seems to dissolve. People float in silence, some read newspapers as a joke, some close their eyes and let the sun do what the sun has always done. But the Dead Sea carries its own kind of tension, a deadline written not in politics, but in numbers. This body of water is disappearing. The surface drops by roughly 1.2 meters every year. Places that were waterfront in old photographs now sit far inland, connected by makeshift paths and shuttle buses. Where water retreats, the earth collapses. Thousands of sinkholes have opened, sudden deep wounds where fresh water dissolves underground salt. Entire stretches of former beach are roped off, not as history, but as hazard. The cause is not mysterious. The Jordan River, the Dead Sea's main source, has been diverted upstream for agriculture and drinking water. What reaches the basin today is only a fraction of what once did, and so the sea shrinks, quietly, relentlessly, as if it is being erased by human thirst. This is where Loop 1 closes. Because this is what you will witness if you come now, a place still beautiful, still strange, still capable of holding your body like a cradle, yet visibly retreating, year after year, out of its own shoreline. And Loop 2 sharpens into its final form. Not everything urgent wears the face of conflict. Some urgency is simply time doing what time does, accelerated by human hands. For those watching who feel the season of life shifting beneath them, the Dead Sea asks a question without raising its voice. 50 years is a projection, 5 years is a decision. Will you be here, able, willing, healthy enough to float in these ancient waters while they still exist as a single sea, not a memory split into pools? The Holy Land does not only hold sacred sites, it holds vanishing points. And as the light begins to turn gold across the salt, you look up toward the plateau that rises above the basin, because one more story waits there, a story about survival that did not retreat.
Masada rises above the desert like a thought you cannot unthink, a fortress on a plateau, carved into the edge of emptiness. From below, it looks impossible. From above, it looks inevitable. You can reach the summit by cable car, gliding over cliffs that drop toward the Dead Sea. The ascent is brief, but the perspective shift is permanent. The basin spreads out beneath you, the water glints, the desert holds its breath. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Jewish rebels made their last stand here against Rome. The siege lasted months. The Romans built a massive ramp, an engineering statement that said simply, no place is unreachable. And when the fortress could no longer hold, the story turns difficult. Not heroic in the easy way, not tragic in a way you can package. According to the historian Josephus, the defenders chose death over slavery. It is a story that has been told as defiance. It is also a story that can be read as despair. Masada forces you to hold both interpretations at once. The hidden truth here is not a slogan about courage. It is the recognition that survival has many faces. Sometimes it is Father Serap's quiet bread and prayer. Sometimes it is Layla's insistence on story. Sometimes it is a wall of ancient stone absorbing millions of folded notes. And sometimes it is a decision made at the edge of a cliff, in a world closing in. From the summit, the Holy Land looks peaceful. That is the final paradox. Distance can make anything look simple, but up here you can also see the through line, not harmony, persistence.
So what does the Holy Land still hide? Not secrets buried underground, truths in plain sight. It hides that coexistence is not the same as harmony, and yet it is real. It is a market where the call to prayer threads through the same air as church bells. It is a church shared by denominations who cannot agree and still keep showing up. It is an Armenian courtyard where survival arrives as routine. It hides that the sacred does not live apart from the ordinary. Here, holiness walks through commerce. It bends through narrow alleys. It waits at checkpoints. It sits at kitchen tables. And it hides one more truth, the one the Dead Sea makes impossible to ignore. Not all time is human time. Some places are on a faster clock. If you have ever felt the quiet fear that your someday may not arrive, this is your permission to treat that feeling with respect, not panic, clarity. For those who feel called to see this land for themselves, know that the path is navigable. The old city is walked every day. Guided groups exist for those who prefer structure, perspective, and calm. Spring and fall soften the heat. Rest comes often if you let it. And the reward is not a checklist of holy sites. The reward is this: to stand in a place where people have refused for centuries to let meaning disappear. If this journey stayed with you, consider subscribing. And tell me in the comments, what place have you been postponing until the calendar feels safer, until the world feels calmer, until you feel younger? Because the sacred, as it turns out, rarely waits.